How a 2,250-pound giant pumpkin is grown. A video sharing the entire process from seed to harvest. The man making seedling cups at the beginning of the video is Jamie Greywim, a giant pumpkin enthusiast. On April 11th, the local temperature has begun to slowly rise, and Jamie is busy preparing for pumpkin seedling work. At the local fair, there is an annual giant pumpkin weigh-off competition, with a first prize of $6,500, and breaking the fair record can earn an additional high bonus. Of course, Jamie participates in the competition not for the money. It's just his hobby in his spare time. He prepared the seedling soil simply by adding a bit of biological fungicide and rooting powder, controlling the moisture to ensure it doesn't drip when squeezed. Temperature is also key to successful germination. Jamie placed the temperature probe of the heating mat in the soil, setting it to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. While the soil was preheating, he prepared several cups to soak the seeds, adding hydrogen peroxide at a 20-to-1 ratio to disinfect and break seed dormancy. High-quality giant pumpkin seeds are not cheap, ranging from $10 to $50 each depending on the variety, and there are many fakes. Therefore, Jamie treats each seed he collects very seriously. The next day, after the seeds had soaked overnight, Jamie labeled the seedling cups with the variety names and planted the seeds pointed end down into the soil. 3 days later, the seeds had sprouted, but some were stuck, so Jamie carefully helped them. Under the grow lights, the seedlings are prevented from growing too tall. A few days later, the seedlings' roots had filled the seedling cups, and Jamie needed to transplant them into 1-gallon pots, continuing to nurture them under grow lights. On April 27th, Jamie mainly focused on preparing the land for planting the giant pumpkins. The field was covered with grass, which he mixed into the soil after harvesting to act as a good source of nitrogen as it decomposes. Jamie had previously collected soil samples for testing, and based on the test report, he adjusted the soil quality by adding urea, sulfur, potassium sulfate, and silicon to regulate the soil's pH and supplement nutrients. The cart was filled with soil activators, borax, and various trace elements. Jamie also added humic acid to increase soil fertility. On April 30th, the giant pumpkin seedlings had grown significantly. Jamie took them outside daily to harden off, gradually getting them used to the outdoor climate. After determining the transplant location, Jamie dug a 1.5 meter by 1.5 meter square hole, laid heating cables at the bottom to increase soil temperature, mixed in fertilizers, and refilled the hole. He then positioned and secured a movable mini greenhouse. On May 7th, after the true leaves of the giant pumpkin seedlings hardened, Jamie transplanted 2 plants of the same variety in the greenhouse, planning to keep the stronger one based on their growth. Jamie cared for these seedlings as if they were children, shading them with sheets when the sun was too intense, providing ventilation with a fan, and watering them with water-soluble fertilizer in small, frequent amounts to avoid over-fertilization and root burn. Jamie also planted marigolds around the giant pumpkins to prevent root knot nematodes, though their main purpose was to mark the underground heating cable boundaries. On May 24th, the giant pumpkin vines had grown to about 2 meters. Jamie pruned the weaker vines after noticing one had slight kinks and flattening, which could hinder nutrient and water transport to the fruit. A few days later, the mini greenhouse could no longer accommodate the growing vines, so Jamie carefully removed it, tilled the soil around the plants, and laid a weed barrier fabric along the main vine, securing each side vine with bamboo stakes to guide their growth. He cut openings in the fabric at each leaf node along the main vine, applied rooting gel and bone meal under each node, and covered them with soil to encourage root growth. On June 19th, the giant pumpkin vines and leaves had formed a large canopy, and Jamie prepared for fruit setting. He selected a female flower on the main vine, wrapped it with coarse cotton to prevent insect pollination, and planned to use a male flower from another plant for hand pollination, ensuring complete pollination. When the female flower opened, he peeled back the petals of the male flower, carefully brushed the stamens against the pistil of the female flower, and closed the female flower with a small tie to prevent contamination from other pollen. As the side branches reached a certain length, Jamie pinched off their tips, and removed old and yellow leaves to prevent pest infestation and competition for nutrients. After confirming successful pollination, he cut off the main vine behind the small pumpkin to direct all resources to the fruit. Jamie then placed a perforated wooden board, several layers of non-woven fabric, and sand under the fruit to prevent decay from ground contact. On July 1st, Jamie pollinated 2 small pumpkins to prevent any mishaps. Now he removed the slower-growing one. A few weeks later, Jamie neglected his pumpkins due to a matchmaking attempt, but luckily, the weeds did not affect the giant pumpkin's growth. By September 3rd, the pumpkin had grown very large. Jamie checked the health of the pumpkin and the main vine daily, performed regular maintenance, and watered and fertilized weekly. On September 28th, after 5 months, the giant pumpkin was finally ready for harvest. Jamie called friends to help transport it to the local fair for the annual weigh-off. The pumpkin weighed 2,480 pounds and won first place, setting a new record. After the competition, Jamie took the pumpkin home, cut it open and collected all the seeds, sharing them with giant pumpkin enthusiasts worldwide, keeping only a few for himself. Finally, Jamie carved a giant jack-o'-lantern, placing it by the roadside for people to admire, receiving loud praises every night.